What is the role of the Brahmacari Ashram in the Vedic society? And is there any difference in its role in the modern-day ISKCON, practically and ideologically?
In Vedic society, any well-bred, well-raised male child would enter the Brahmacari ashram. First of all, we have to understand that in the classical Vedic civilization, children were well-bred. They were not just the product of random interactions and low consciousness. So, from the very beginning, from conception, a special child was attracted to this world. And the Brahmacari ashram took advantage of that auspicious beginning by training the boys in a life of sense control. Many of you no doubt have heard the classic Brahmacari verse in the 7th canto Bhagavatam. Brahmacari kule vasantanto guru hitam. The Brahmacari lives at the place of the spiritual master, because in classic Vedic culture, the Gurukulas, the ashrams, were all under the auspice of a guru. ISKCON, as we know, is a multi-guru organization, multinational and multi-guru. But in classic Vedic culture, each guru has had his own ashram, Gurukula. So Brahmacari Gurukula. The Brahmacari lives at the place of the guru. Vasandanto Guru Hitam. And what are the characteristics of his living there? Control of the senses. And Guru Hitam, living there simply for the benefit of the guru. And of course, the guru is living simply for the benefit of his guru through parampara to Krishna. The verse continues, describing the Brahmacari renders menial service. Submissive menial service. And he has an attitude of firm friendship for the guru. Does that mean that the little Brahmacari pats the guru on the back and we're friends? No. It means that he embraces the mission of the guru. He embraces the vision the guru has. And that way, the Brahmacari establishes friendship with the guru. In describing Bhishma Dev's prayers, Srila Prabhupada makes a very interesting point. He says that the Brahmacari ashram is the best place for training both the attached and the unattached. In that, it's expected, even during classic Vedic times, that some Brahmacharis will choose to marry. Nevertheless, the Brahmacari ashram is considered the best place for training those who want to be attached, or who later choose to be attached, as well as those who opt for being unattached. They opt for a life of renunciation. So let's think about that. Obviously, we don't have ideal Vedic culture these days. In fact, we have the opposite. You take whatever Vedic culture is and flip it upside down, and you have today. A time in which there's no concept of sense control. A time in which men have very little honor or integrity. They've wasted it all on various casual encounters, various escapades since a young age. What the young men don't do with another person, they do by the medium of the internet. So, young men's brains are just boiling. Now we have to consider biology. Puberty sets in, and then by the time the young man reaches 21, he has reached the peak of the male hormone cycle. When the young man is 16 years old, the testosterone, the male hormone, increases tenfold. I'm saying this so you get an idea of how we are being pushed around by material nature, within and without. A tenfold increase in the male hormone. This is why you go crazy in a certain way as a teenager. But that male hormone, that testosterone, keeps climbing. And at 21, it peaks. So, young men who are around 21, they're basically walking furnaces. They're just ablaze. Now, after the age of 21, it's not that there's a sudden drop-off. No. It's a very, very slow decrease. So just by understanding the bodily hormones, you can understand what you're in for. In this day and age of sensual madness, it's very important that there's a facility for at least a few young men to reclaim their glories, so to speak, to regather themselves after being splayed out for so many years in Kali Yuga activities. Certainly not every young man who approaches bhakti is going to opt for this lifestyle. Remember the old days of ISKCON? In which whenever a young man would take up the process of bhakti, immediately he was put into the temple, into saffron, and declared, "You are a Brahmacari." All right, that tactic may have had its place in the emergency startup of the Hare Krishna movement, but now we have a lot more experience to go upon. So therefore, what I have seen is, when dealing with Western young men, especially, it's good that they have a period of familiarizing themselves with bhakti and their options, so that when they enter the Brahmacari ashram, they are voluntarily choosing that lifestyle in full consciousness of what they're getting into. And then, at least my policy in running Brahmacari ashrams is, there's no pretty please with ice cream on top, because you knew what you're getting into, fully. In fact, my own approach is that I'll be quite resistant to young men's offers to enter the Brahmacari ashram. They really have to push hard on me. They got to knock on the door very loudly. They have to really convince me they know what they're getting into and they want this. Not for their whole life. Who can predict what the whole life will be like, but at least for a good chunk of time. because we don't want the Brahmacharya ashram to be like a revolving door where someone enters 1 month and 3 months later they change their mind. I'll never forget, back in 1974, the famous Henry Street Temple in Brooklyn, New York. Seems like we had about 100 brahmacharis, at least 100 persons wearing saffron. And we're all living in a few rooms on the top floor of the temple. So I went to sleep in my sleeping bag on whatever spot on the floor was available. And as I drifted off, I noticed there was one brahmachari pacing the floor very intently. He had something on his mind. Then I woke up in the morning to go to Mangalarti, 3:30, and as I got out of the sleeping bag, I noticed the same brahmachari was still pacing the floor. He had been up all night. So I asked him, "Is there something wrong? You've been up all night just thinking?" He said, "Yes. All night I've been just pacing the floor. Why? I have to make a decision before the conch blows at Mangalarti. I have to decide whether I'll take sannyas or I'm going to get married." That was life in the early days of this guy. No doubt things have progressed a bit since then in terms of our sociological and psychological understandings. My point is that if we're going to have Brahmacharya ashrams, they should really be purpose-built, purpose-designed for those who consciously and enthusiastically embrace that lifestyle. No one should be forced, needless to say, into saffron by social pressure, desire for fame, desire for praise. Other obstacles in dealing with brahmacharis today, health obstacles due to so much lifestyle abuse before coming to bhakti. Often young men are quite weak and sickly. You'll also find mental obstacles due to psychological breakdown of society. These things have to be taken into account in terms of the suitability of the candidate. And without making any value judgment whatsoever, you're also going to deal with gender complexities, which are so common today. Regardless of what your view is upon these gender complexities, there's no doubt the Brahmacharya ashram is not the place for them. It would make the men involved very uncomfortable. So all these things have to be taken into account. You'll point out that there'll be a significant percentage of brahmacharis today who will choose to marry. All right, but at least they've had a solid preparation in sense control. That's very important. You might say, well, wouldn't it be better that they would have spent those few years out preparing for a career? But we must take into account what is our real career. Our real career begins with learning to control our mind and senses. Without that, what can you do? You can't even be materially successful without learning how to control your mind and senses. So it's very important for a forward-thinking young man to consider a term in the Brahmacharya ashram if there is a genuine Brahmacharya ashram in your area, and that's becoming a rarity. I hold that it's better to avoid a so-called Brahmacharya ashram where there's no leadership, no proper curriculum, no proper training. It's better to avoid that and be an honest bachelor living in a congregation than to be a part of a so-called Brahmacharya ashram. Brahmachari is simply in the color of the cloth. When I passed through Thailand on my way to India from down under, I noticed that it's still the custom in Thailand that every young man spends at least a few weeks of his life in a monastery. They still have some traditional appreciation of that. Of course, Thailand has its wild side. But at the same time, this notion is still there, that monastic training, at least for a few weeks of your life, is good for everyone. And so, it's still, the tradition is still done, for the most part. The Brahmacharya ashram in ISKCON today should be a place where men will look back at their training, no matter what path they take after the ashram. They'll look back and really think that was a quality time of my life. All right, I couldn't go the distance, but I recommend it for all those who are so inclined. I have no regrets. And there'll be some men who actually go the distance, believe it or not. And they should get that chance to live an uncomplicated life in which they can focus 24 hours a day on their own spiritual advancement so that they can be of real benefit to others. Sometimes we think that if I become a brahmachari, I'll cut myself off from others. I'll live in a cloistered world, closed off. I won't be able to share freely with others. I'll have to live a very restricted, crimped life of barring myself from any personal expression. I'll have to be very, very careful, very, very repressed. I can't share freely with people. I can't freely love and be loved. Actually, the real brahmachari candidate understands that love and care are not cheap things. They both require training and qualification. I always point out that the whole world is full of people who want to love and care without becoming qualified. So if we actually want to love and care, we should undergo the appropriate training. So the brahmachari is apparently restricting himself for the sake of later extending himself in the most noble, wonderful way. Think about someone who goes to med school to be a doctor. Basically, they've written off 10 years of their life from the time they start the university until the time they finish their specialized training. Basically, it's 10 years before they get going. All for the sake of helping people's bodies and making money too, paying off a lot of debts also. So, what's wrong with a young man, if he feels the calling, to spend years becoming qualified how to love and care in the greatest way? Now, in the process of that brahmachari training, there must be camaraderie, because no man is an island. It's not that the brahmachari cuts off association with women, and that's it. No, there has to be strong bonding in the brahmacharya ashram. As I often quote, Srila Prabhupada stated that anything can be tolerated in good association. So the Brahmacari ashram is meant to give that good association so that the Brahmachari can tolerate the whips of Maya and develop his attraction for Krishna.